Princess Serena stood in the grand hall of the royal palace, her eyes scanning the room filled with diplomats and visitors from across the galaxy. Her heart, however, wasn't in the political discussions happening around her. Instead, her thoughts were far away, drifting back to a time when her life had almost ended. Years ago, she had been just another princess in danger. The conspiracy within her own court had nearly claimed her life. But on that fateful day, a human warrior named Jace had stepped in, saving her from the deadly plot. He had fought bravely, risking his life for hers, and in doing so, had earned her eternal gratitude. Since then, Serena had never forgotten him. Yet, she had never seen him again. The memory of Jace haunted her. His face was as clear in her mind as if it were only yesterday. His strong, confident eyes, the way he had so easily protected her, the simple, unspoken bond they had shared. Despite the passing years, she could still feel the warmth of his presence. It was as if fate had brought him into her life for a reason. But why? What was it about that day that had changed everything? Now, as the ruler of her kingdom, Serena faced even greater challenges. Her people were threatened by forces both inside and outside the palace, and she had no one to trust. But then, a whisper came through the dark corridors of power. Jace might still be alive, and he might be fighting in the farthest reaches of the galaxy. She had heard rumors about a human warrior who had been taking down threats across the universe, someone whose strength and courage had become the stuff of legends. Could it be him? Could the man who had once saved her life be the same one who had become a hero in the stars? Serena's heart raced. She had to find him, to bring him back to her world. There was no telling what could happen if she didn't act quickly. But what if he had forgotten her? What if all those years had changed him beyond recognition? The princess made her decision. She would send out a covert mission to find Jace. She couldn't face her enemies alone, and she needed someone she could trust. Someone who had once shown her that there was still goodness in the universe, even in the darkest of times. Her mind was made up, and she gave the order. Her trusted advisor, Captain Thorne, was the first to be informed. He nodded and left quickly, already preparing for the journey. The mission would be risky, but Serena had no other choice. She had to find the man who had once saved her life, Jace. As she stood by the window, looking out at the distant stars, Serena felt a sense of destiny settle over her. She didn't know where this path would lead, but she knew one thing for sure. This reunion could change everything. Jace was far from the man he once was. The young warrior who had risked everything to save Princess Serena all those years ago had grown into a battle-hardened soldier. His days were now filled with endless missions, fighting for causes that often felt distant and disconnected from anything personal. Yet there was something inside him that refused to give up. It was a quiet strength, a reminder of the times when he had fought not for glory, but for something real. He had heard rumors of a human warrior making a name for himself across the galaxy. Jace never paid much attention to them. He wasn't in this for fame. He fought because he had to, because the galaxy was a dangerous place, and he had his own battles to fight. However, one morning, while he was preparing for another mission, a messenger arrived with a strange request. The messenger, a tall figure with a solemn expression, approached him with an urgent message. Jace eyed him suspiciously. "What is this about?" Jace asked, his voice low and guarded. He wasn't in the mood for surprises. The messenger handed him a small device, one that contained a personal message. When Jace activated it, a hologram appeared. To his surprise, it was Princess Serena, the same woman he had saved years ago. She looked different now, stronger, more confident, but the sadness in her eyes was unmistakable. "Jace," the hologram began, "I don't know if you remember me, but I will never forget you. My kingdom is in danger, and I need your help. You once saved my life, and now I am asking you to help me save my people. Please come back. My world is in chaos, and I can trust no one else." The message ended, and the hologram flickered out. Jace stared at the empty air for a moment, processing what he had just seen. He never expected to hear from her again. After all, He had saved her, and he had gone his own way, lost in the depths of the universe. But now, Serena needed him. She was asking for his help. Jace didn't know what to think. He had moved on from his past. He had built a life of his own, far from the politics and intrigue of the royal court. The galaxy was full of chaos, and he had been doing his part in his own way. But this was different. He clenched his fists, his heart conflicted. The memories of that day, of how Serena had trusted him, flooded back. He couldn't ignore it. He couldn't forget the bond they had shared, even if it had been brief. Without a word, Jace made his decision. He would go to her. He would answer the call, not because he was a hero, but because he knew deep down that there were some bonds that couldn't be broken, no matter how much time passed. The warrior gathered his gear and prepared for the journey. The mission ahead would be dangerous, but he was no stranger to danger. And if there was even a chance that he could help Serena again, he would take it. As the ship powered up, Jace looked out the window at the stars. The galaxy was vast, but in that moment, he felt a sense of purpose that had long been missing. He was heading into the unknown, but for the first time in a long while, it felt right. The journey to Serena's kingdom took several days, and Jace found himself deep in thought. As the stars passed by his ship's window, he couldn't help but think about the princess. The last time he had seen her, she was just a young woman in need of protection, lost in a world of palace intrigue. Now she was the ruler of a kingdom, a powerful leader. Would she still remember him? Would the connection they shared all those years ago still be there? Jace couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and nervousness. He wasn't the same man who had once fought to save her life. He had changed, hardened by years of conflict and loss. But Serena was still a part of his past that he couldn't shake. Even now, her face lingered in his mind, and the promise of reuniting with her filled him with an odd sense of hope. When Jace finally arrived at the royal palace, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. As he stepped off his ship, the palace guards greeted him with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Word had spread quickly about his arrival, and Serena's people seemed eager to see the warrior who had once saved their princess. Jace was led through the grand hallways of the palace, his boots echoing on the stone floors. The grandeur of the palace was overwhelming, but Jace focused only on one thing: Serena. The thought of seeing her again filled him with both anxiety and anticipation. Finally, he was led to the royal chambers. The doors opened, and there she stood, Princess Serena. She looked even more stunning than he remembered, her royal attire radiating elegance and power. But it wasn't just her appearance that struck him. It was the strength in her eyes, the confidence that seemed to fill the room. She was no longer the helpless princess he had once saved. She was a queen, ready to lead her people. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply stared at each other, both unsure of what to say or how to react. Jace's heart raced, and he could see the same nervous energy in Serena's eyes. "Jace," Serena finally said, her voice soft but steady. "I didn't know if you would come, but I am so glad you're here." Jace nodded, his voice a little rough. "I couldn't ignore your call, Serena. You asked for my help. I owe you that." The words felt strange to him, almost too simple for the situation they found themselves in. But they both understood the weight behind them. The years that had passed didn't seem to matter anymore. All that mattered was that they were together again. Serena stepped forward, her gaze never leaving his. "I never expected to see you again. After everything that happened, I thought we would just go our separate ways. But now," she paused, as if searching for the right words. "Now, I need you more than ever." Jace felt the familiar warmth in his chest. He had saved her once, but it seemed that this time, the roles might be reversed. There was something different in the air, a sense of destiny that neither of them could ignore. For the first time in years, Jace allowed himself to hope. He didn't know what would come next, but he knew one thing for sure: this reunion was just the beginning. You said. As Jace stood before Serena, he noticed the weight of responsibility in her eyes. She wasn't just a princess anymore. She was the ruler of a kingdom, and it was clear that the burden of leadership was taking its toll. Her posture was straight, but her shoulders seemed heavy, as if the entire galaxy rested on them. Jace's thoughts shifted. He had come to help, but what exactly did she need from him? The royal palace was filled with beauty and luxury, but he could sense the tension in the air. The peaceful kingdom he had remembered seemed to be on the edge of chaos. Serena, sensing his confusion, motioned for him to follow her. She led him to a quiet room at the far end of the palace. The walls were adorned with ancient tapestries, and a large window offered a stunning view of the kingdom below. But Serena didn't seem to notice the beauty of the room. She closed the door behind them, her face serious. "Jace, I have asked for your help because I have no one else I can trust," Serena said, her voice quieter now. She moved to the desk, picking up a piece of parchment and holding it out to him. "My kingdom is in danger. There are threats from within the court, and I can't see them all." Jace took the parchment and studied it. It was a list of names, officials, advisors, even some military leaders. His eyes widened as he scanned the names. These were people who had the power to shape the future of the kingdom. If they were turning against Serena, it would be disastrous. "The conspiracy runs deep," Serena continued, her gaze fixed on him. "I have been betrayed by people I trusted, Jace. The court is filled with enemies hiding behind a veil of loyalty. I've tried to root them out, but I can't do it alone. That's why I need you." Jace looked up at her, seeing the pain in her eyes. He had always known Serena to be strong, but now he saw the vulnerability that lay beneath the surface. She was carrying the weight of an entire kingdom on her shoulders, and it was breaking her. "I didn't come here expecting a simple mission," Jace said, his voice firm. "If you need my help, I'm with you. But I need you to be honest with me, Serena. This is more than just politics. This is your life, and the lives of your people. I need to know what's at stake." Serena nodded slowly, her expression softening. "I've always been honest with you, Jace, but this is different. The future of my people is hanging by a thread. If I fail, everything I've worked for, everything my family has fought for, could be lost." She walked over to him, placing a hand on his arm. "I need you to be by my side. I need your strength, your skill, and your loyalty. The kingdom cannot fall, Jace. Not again." Jace felt a surge of determination. He had no doubt that Serena was a strong leader, but it was clear she needed more than just strength. She needed someone she could trust completely, and Jace was ready to be that person. "Then let's do this," he said, looking into her eyes. "I won't let you down. We'll take them down together." Serena smiled faintly, a flicker of hope shining through. She knew that with Jace by her side, there was a chance, maybe the only chance, to save her kingdom. The days that followed were filled with planning, strategy, and late-night conversations. Jace and Serena worked tirelessly to uncover the conspiracy threatening the kingdom. They moved carefully, trusting no one, and watching everyone. The palace was a vast maze of halls and secret rooms, and even the most trusted advisors could not be trusted anymore. Jace had always been skilled in combat, but this was different. It wasn't just about fighting. It was about outsmarting an enemy who was hiding in plain sight. They couldn't afford to make a mistake. Serena had led her kingdom through many challenges, but this was one she couldn't face alone. Her mind was sharp, but the strain of ruling and the fear of betrayal weighed heavily on her. Jace could see it in the way she held herself, the way she hesitated before making decisions. One evening, as the two of them sat in a private room, looking over the information they had gathered, Serena broke the silence. "Jace, I've been thinking," she said, her voice quiet but full of concern. "I've trusted these people my whole life. Some of them were my closest friends. How could I have been so blind?" Jace looked at her, understanding her frustration. "It's not your fault, Serena. You can't always see the darkness hiding in people you trust. That's what I'm here for. You don't have to carry this burden alone anymore." Serena's eyes met his, and for a moment, she didn't say anything. The silence between them was heavy, but there was something comforting about it. It was as if, in this moment, they had found something beyond the politics and the kingdom. They had found trust, a trust built on shared experiences, on the bond they had formed long ago. Jace stood up, moving towards the desk where they had scattered their papers. "We need to act fast," he said, flipping through a stack of documents. "Every day we waste, they grow stronger. And I have a feeling they're already planning their next move." Serena nodded, her jaw set in determination. "You're right. We can't let them control everything. I need to show my people that I'm still in charge, that I can protect them." They spent the next few hours finalizing their plan. They would confront the conspirators directly. No more hiding, no more waiting. Jace had already begun gathering a small group of trusted soldiers who were loyal to Serena, but they needed more than just force. They needed to expose the traitors to the people, to show them the truth. As the night wore on, Jace could see that Serena was growing tired. She had not stopped working since his arrival, and he could see the toll it was taking on her. He stepped over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You need rest," he said softly. "You can't leave like this." Serena shook her head, but she didn't argue. She was too exhausted, too weighed down by the pressure. "I can't rest, not until this is over," she said, her voice full of quiet resolve. Jace looked at her, his eyes full of understanding. He knew the weight of leadership, the constant fear of failure, but he also knew that if anyone could pull through this, it was Serena. "You're not alone in this," he said, his voice firm. "We'll see it through, together." Serena met his gaze, and for the first time in days, a small smile appeared on her face. It wasn't much, but it was enough. She knew that with Jace by her side, she could face whatever was coming next. As they sat together, making final preparations, both of them knew that the path ahead would be dangerous. But they also knew that they weren't facing it alone. The bond between them had only grown stronger, and that more than anything was their greatest strength. The plan was set in motion, and Jace and Serena knew that they were walking into the heart of danger. Their target was the royal court, where the conspirators had hidden themselves behind layers of loyalty and deceit. It was time to expose them, but neither of them could predict how everything would unfold. The night before their confrontation, Jace sat in his quarters, sharpening his blades, preparing himself mentally for the battle ahead. He knew it wasn't just a physical fight, it was about trust. He had come to realize that the hardest battles weren't fought with weapons. They were fought with choices, with the risks they were willing to take. Serena had insisted on going with him. She wasn't going to stay behind in the safety of her chambers while others fought for her. She was the ruler of this kingdom, and she would face her enemies head-on. Jace understood her resolve, but he also understood the danger. If she was captured or harmed, it would be a devastating blow to everything they were trying to protect. But Serena wouldn't be swayed. "I will not hide while my people are at risk," she had said. "This is my fight too." The next day, as the sun began to set, Jace and Serena stood side by side in the palace courtyard. The air was thick with tension. They had gathered a small, loyal group of soldiers, people who had sworn their allegiance to the princess. But the odds were against them. The conspirators had the advantage of numbers, and they had already planted their spies throughout the palace. Jace looked at Serena. She was calm on the outside, but he could see the worry in her eyes. He placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "We can do this," he said quietly. "We've come this far." Serena nodded, but the uncertainty lingered. "I don't know who to trust anymore, Jace. The people I've depended on. I never thought they could betray me." "That's the hardest part," Jace replied, his voice steady. "But you're not alone in this. I'll be right here, every step of the way." They moved through the palace, their group advancing silently. The palace was eerily quiet, as if the very walls were holding their breath. As they neared the throne room, Serena's hand tightened around the hilt of her sword. Her heart was racing, but she couldn't show weakness. Not now. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the halls. The sound of boots stomping and weapons being drawn reached their ears. Jace motioned for the group to spread out, ready to face whatever came their way. They reached a corner just in time to see two of Serena's closest advisors stepping out of a hidden passageway, their faces twisted with malice. "It's over, princess," one of them sneered, drawing his sword. "You've lost. Your time is up." Serena's breath caught in her throat. These were people she had trusted, people she had called allies. The shock was overwhelming, but she couldn't afford to show weakness now. She stepped forward, her voice cold and commanding. "You think you can control this kingdom through betrayal? You've underestimated me." Jace stepped to her side, his stance protective. "This is your fight, Serena. I'll watch your back." The two traitors laughed, but the laugh quickly turned into surprise as Jace lunged forward, taking one of them down with a swift strike. Serena didn't hesitate. She was a ruler, but in this moment, she was also a warrior. With a cry, she swung her sword, knocking the other traitor to the ground. As the traitors were dealt with, Serena turned to Jace, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "I can't believe it," she whispered. "They were so close to me. How did I miss it?" Jace placed a hand on her shoulder. "We all make mistakes, but you've got to trust yourself now, Serena. Trust that you can finish what we started." The fight was far from over, but Serena's heart felt lighter. She had been betrayed, but now she knew who her true allies were, and with Jace by her side, she would stop at nothing to protect her kingdom. The tension in the palace grew thick as Serena and Jace made their way deeper into the heart of the kingdom's power. They had exposed the first layer of the conspiracy, but it was only the beginning. The traitors they had defeated were just pawns in a much larger game. The real enemies were still out there, hidden in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Serena knew that she couldn't delay any longer. She had to act decisively. Her people were relying on her, and with each passing moment, the conspirators were getting closer to their ultimate goal. This wasn't just about a few corrupt officials. This was about the future of her entire kingdom. She could feel the weight of that responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. Jace, walking beside her, noticed the quiet strength in her eyes. She had always been a leader, but now, in the face of betrayal, she had become something even more. He had seen her face fear before, but now there was only determination. Serena was no longer just a princess in need of protection. She had become a queen, unwavering and resolute. "Are you ready for this?" Jace asked, his voice steady but full of concern. He knew the dangers that lay ahead, but more than that, he knew that Serena was about to face her greatest test. Serena turned to him, her expression soft but determined. "I have no choice, Jace. This is my kingdom, and I will not let it fall." The two of them moved quickly through the palace corridors, their loyal soldiers following in their wake. The time for secret meetings and quiet planning was over. The final confrontation was at hand. They arrived at the grand hall, where the conspirators had gathered. Serena's breath caught in her throat as she saw the faces of those who had betrayed her. Among them were familiar faces, trusted advisors, even friends who had turned against her for power and greed. It was a cruel twist of fate, and for a moment, Serena's resolve faltered. But then she felt Jace's steady presence beside her. His unwavering gaze reminded her of the strength she had once felt when he saved her life. Now she had to be the one to fight for her people. Without a word, Serena stepped into the room. The conspirators froze, their smug expressions turning to shock as they saw her standing before them, unafraid. "You thought you could control my kingdom," Serena said, her voice cold and commanding. "But you were wrong." One of the conspirators, a tall man who had once been her most trusted advisor, sneered. You think you can stop us, princess. You have no allies left. The people have already turned against you. Serena's heart pounded, but she held her ground. You underestimate me, and you underestimate my people. They will stand by me, just as Jace has. He's not the only one who will fight for what's right. Jace stepped forward, his eyes flashing with fierce determination. We're not backing down. You can try to tear this kingdom apart, but we'll fight until the last breath. The conspirators hesitated. For the first time, they saw real resistance. They had believed they were invincible, that Serena had no one left to protect her. But in that moment, it became clear that they had made a grave mistake. The battle that followed was swift and intense. Jace fought with precision, his movements like a well-honed machine, while Serena used her own skills to disarm and defeat her enemies. It wasn't just a fight for power. It was a fight for her people's future. Every swing of her sword was a reminder that she wasn't just a ruler. She was a warrior, ready to defend everything she had worked for. When the final traitor was defeated, Serena stood in the center of the room, her chest heaving with exertion. The palace was silent, save for the sound of heavy breathing. She had won, but the cost of this victory weighed heavily on her heart. She had lost people she once trusted, people she thought were loyal to her. But in that moment, she knew that the kingdom was finally free from the threat that had loomed over it. Jace stepped up beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder. You did it, he said quietly, his voice filled with pride. Your kingdom is safe. Serena looked around at the fallen conspirators, her heart heavy but resolute. We did it. Together. And with that, they knew that they had overcome the greatest challenge of all. Together. The sun rose over the palace, casting a golden light across the kingdom that had just been saved. The Grand Hall, once a place of tension and danger, now stood silent, peaceful, as if the events of the past days had never occurred. But Serena knew better. The kingdom had been through a storm, and it would take time to rebuild what had been lost. Jace stood beside her on the palace balcony, his gaze drifting over the land. The view was breathtaking. The rolling hills, the busy streets of the capital, and the sparkling river that wound its way through the heart of the kingdom. It all seemed calm now, but Jace knew that things could change in an instant. They couldn't afford to let their guard down. Not yet. Serena, however, seemed different. Her posture was still straight, her expression calm, but there was something in her eyes, an understanding of what had been accomplished. She had faced betrayal, fought back against enemies, and emerged victorious. But more than that, she had learned who her true allies were. Thank you, Serena said, turning to Jace. Her voice was soft, but filled with gratitude. If it hadn't been for you, I don't know what would have happened. You've done more than save my life. You've helped me save my kingdom. Jace looked at her, a small smile forming on his lips. I didn't do it alone. You were the one who led the charge. I was just following your lead. Serena shook her head, her eyes never leaving his. You've always been there for me, Jace. I can't forget that. You gave me something I thought I had lost, a sense of hope. And now, because of you, I'm not alone. Jace's heart softened at her words. It wasn't just the kingdom that had been saved. It was something more, a bond between them that had grown stronger with each passing challenge. The years apart hadn't diminished it. If anything, it had only deepened. The sound of footsteps interrupted the quiet moment, and the two turned to see Captain Thorne approaching. Your Highness, he said with a respectful nod. The people are waiting for you. They want to hear from their ruler. It's time to show them that their faith in you was not misplaced. Serena nodded, straightening her posture. Thank you, Captain. I'll be right there. As Thorne walked away, Serena turned back to Jace. I have to do this, she said softly. The people need to know that I'm still their leader, but I want you by my side. Will you stand with me? Jace didn't hesitate. Always, he replied. Together, they made their way down to the courtyard, where the people had gathered in anticipation. The crowd was vast. Thousands of citizens from every corner of the kingdom, all eager to hear from the ruler who had led them through the storm. Serena stepped out into the open, Jace beside her, and the crowd fell silent. She could feel the weight of their gaze, but she didn't flinch. This was her moment. This was her time to show them that their trust had not been in vain. She raised her hand, and the crowd quieted even further. "My people," she began, her voice clear and strong. "I stand before you today because of your strength, your courage, and your belief in me. Together, we have faced the darkness, and together, we have overcome it. The traitors who sought to tear us apart have been defeated, and I stand here as your queen, unbroken." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices loud and proud. Serena's heart swelled with emotion as she looked out over the sea of faces, each one filled with hope for the future. She wasn't alone anymore. She had Jace by her side, and she had her people who believed in her. As the cheering continued, Jace glanced at Serena, his eyes filled with admiration. He knew that this was just the beginning. They had overcome the hardest part, but there was still much work to be done. Together, they would rebuild the kingdom, not just with strength, but with the trust and loyalty they had earned from each other. Serena turned to him, her smile radiant. "This is just the start," she said, "and with you by my side, I know we can face anything." Jace smiled back, his heart full. "I'm with you, Serena. Always." And in that moment, they both knew that the future was bright. Their journey together had only just begun. The days after the victory were busy. Serena had spent most of her time addressing the concerns of her people, making sure that the kingdom was safe and secure after the threat of betrayal had been wiped away. She worked tirelessly, rebuilding the trust she had lost in some of her closest allies, and ensuring that her people knew that she would never let them down again. Jace, by her side every step of the way, had become not just a protector, but a trusted advisor. His experience and wisdom helped guide Serena through the many challenges that arose in the wake of the conspiracy. Together, they made a powerful team, each complementing the other in ways that made their bond even stronger. One evening, after a long day of meetings and discussions, Serena stood on the balcony of her royal chambers, looking out over the kingdom. The sky was painted with the colors of sunset, and the cool breeze stirred the hair around her face. She felt a sense of peace, something she hadn't felt in a long time. The weight of the crown still rested on her head, but it no longer felt like a burden. She had found her strength again, and she knew it was because of the people around her. Especially Jace. She wasn't alone anymore. She had allies now, real ones, those who were not driven by greed or power, but by a shared belief in a brighter future for the kingdom. It was hard to believe how far they had come in such a short time. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Jace's voice broke the silence, and Serena turned to see him standing in the doorway, his figure silhouetted against the soft light of the setting sun. "It is," she replied, her gaze softening as she looked at him. "I don't think I've ever truly noticed how beautiful it all is. I've been so focused on what needed to be fixed that I forgot to appreciate what we have." Jace stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "That's understandable. You've had a lot on your plate, but now you've made it through. You've rebuilt what was broken. You didn't just protect your kingdom, Serena. You saved it." She smiled, but the smile was tinged with a hint of sadness. "I didn't do it alone. I couldn't have." Jace shook his head, walking closer to her. "Maybe not, but you led, Serena, and I'll follow you wherever you go." Her heart skipped a beat at his words. She had known that Jace had been by her side through the worst of it all, but hearing him say he would follow her no matter what, filled her with warmth. "I don't want to lead alone anymore," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "And I don't want you to leave. Not now. Not ever." Jace looked at her with a tenderness that made her chest tighten. "I'm not going anywhere, Serena. I'm here. For you. For your kingdom." The world outside the palace seemed far away in that moment, as if time itself had paused. There was only the two of them. two people who had survived betrayal and loss and found their way back to each other. They had fought hard, and now they were standing on the edge of something new, something that neither of them had expected but both of them wanted. Serena reached out, her hand finding his. "I can't promise that everything will be easy," she said, her voice steady, "but I can promise that we'll face it together." Jace squeezed her hand gently. "I wouldn't want it any other way." And with that, they both knew that their journey was far from over. There would still be challenges to face, battles to fight, and decisions to make. But no matter what happened, they would face it as partners, united, strong, and ready for whatever the future held. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Serena and Jace stood together, ready to step into the future side by side, knowing that the kingdom they had saved was only the beginning of a new chapter, for them and for all of their people. The following days were filled with celebration. The kingdom rejoiced in their newfound peace, grateful for Serena's leadership and the strength of her allies. The streets of the capital were filled with cheers, songs, and the joyful sounds of people celebrating their freedom from the conspiracy that had almost torn their world apart. Serena, standing at the balcony once again, looked out at the city she had fought so hard to protect. The buildings gleamed in the sunlight, and the people below were going about their day with smiles on their faces, their fears replaced by hope. It was a beautiful sight, one she had never fully appreciated before. She had always been focused on the struggles, the wars, the constant pressure of leadership. But now, in this moment, she could see that the fight had been worth it. Jace stood beside her, watching the same scene, but his thoughts were on the future. He had been by Serena's side through everything. The betrayals, the battles, and the victories. He had watched her grow from a princess into a queen, and the transformation was remarkable. But now he could sense the quiet understanding between them that there was more to be done. The future was still uncertain, and while the kingdom was at peace, there would always be new challenges to face. "Look at them," Serena said, her voice soft. "They believe in me. They believe in us." Jace nodded, his gaze steady as he took in the sights. "You earned that belief, Serena. You fought for them. And they saw that. They trust you because you're not just a ruler. You're someone they can rely on." Serena smiled, but it was more of a thoughtful expression than one of pride. "I couldn't have done it without you, Jace. You've always been there, even when I didn't know what to do. I've learned so much from you." Jace turned to her, his expression serious yet kind. "We've both learned a lot. But more than that, we've both grown. And now we have the chance to build something new, together." Serena's heart swelled at his words. She knew that the path they had walked hadn't been easy. There had been so many moments of doubt, so many times when she had felt like giving up. But Jace had always been there, steady and supportive, helping her see that she wasn't alone. And now she saw that the bond they shared was stronger than ever. "I've been thinking," Serena said, her voice quiet but filled with certainty. "I've spent so much of my life being told what I should do, who I should be. But I don't want to follow anyone else's path anymore. I want to create my own. And I want you with me every step of the way." Jace smiled, his eyes warm with affection. "I've never wanted to be anywhere else, Serena. I'll follow you wherever you go, because your path is mine too. We're in this together, always." For a moment, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. There was a quiet understanding between them, a promise that no matter what came next, they would face it side by side. There would be no more secrets, no more hidden enemies, no more betrayals. The future, with all its uncertainties, was theirs to shape. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the kingdom, Serena and Jace stood together in the fading light. They had fought hard for this moment, and now, as they looked to the future, they knew that it would be filled with challenges and triumphs. But they were ready. They had each other, and they had the trust of their people. And that was all they needed to build a brighter tomorrow. Together, they stepped forward, ready to face whatever came next, their hearts and minds united in the promise of the future.